Hello and welcome to some Derbs Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about grinding in games. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what we do on this podcast?
Well, it's pretty simple. We like to talk about games. Before we get into that, though, we got a couple of pieces of business, I suppose, to take care of. Firstly, last week we played games. What did we play? We did Rune Lords and we did Hell's Rebels from last week. I'm trying to remember what happened off the top of my head.
Have we done 2 Rune Lords since the last recording? Because we played, at the time of recording, we played Rune Lords yesterday.
Yeah, I guess we have.
Yeah, well, in Rune Lords, we made our way to Turtleback Ferry, and we talked to some people there. And then we you go, Buddy, because it was mostly your character stuff.
In Turtleback Ferry?
I mean, well, so people recognized Wooden Wanderer, but no, everybody refused to tell me who they thought I was. But then some stuff happened with
that. That seems very unearned to me. There's got to be a really good reason for, you know what I mean? Like, it's one thing if people are like doing double takes, like, oh, I thought you were, sorry, never mind. You know what I mean? But it's another to be like, I definitely recognize who you are and have used this other name consistently with these other people. And they still won't tell you. It feels a little contrived, I think is the word.
Yeah. We'll see how it turns out. You know, I very clearly built that plot hook into the character. So it's nice to see at least that it's being used. So we'll see how it goes. But more relevantly to Kenzo, we're doing stuff with the Black Arrows right now.
Yeah, we are doing stuff with the Black Arrows. The Black Arrows are really interesting. I like the Black Arrows a lot because I basically founded them in Endless Winter. And it's nice that I kind of get to draw the parallels between how, chaotic, good, probably neutral, maybe Kenzo deals with the Black Arrows versus lawful neutral, lawful good Kanbei, who, we did the same stuff, where we fought at Fort Rannick, so this is what happens, right? We assaulted Fort Rannick, which is this Black Arrow stronghold or whatever. Genzo has every intention of letting the Black Arrows die out. He doesn't care about the organization or anything along those lines. Whereas Kanbei was very eager to take over and restart the Black Arrows from kind of that brink of extinction, and it makes me feel good because I get a little nervous that sometimes I'm playing the same character over and over again.
Yeah, I'm interested actually how long this has been going in Mark's head, because the Black Arrows are the name of the organization in the core AP as well.
Yeah, well, this book was taken from. This is like a history lesson, I suppose. This book was taken almost pound for pound and converted into Mark's Endless Winter game. Some of the names were changed to be, like, I don't actually think it was called Turtleback Ferry, but it was called something different. But, the Black Arrows were there, Fort Rannick was there, these ogres were there, all of that stuff is very in line with kind of what we were, is kind of in line with what we were expecting, but we went a different path with it, because after we cleared out Fort Rannick, and did a little bit of other kind of random heroics, we were granted the province politically, and then the game kind of became very much about, like, we are a group of heroes who just became, like, the leader of the local militia and the mayor of, the local town and ruler of the local province, kind of politicky stuff, which was pretty neat and interesting. But yeah, I have no idea what the timeline is like for Mark in general.
Yeah, neat. But I'm looking forward to we killed some ogres, and now there's Lamia that's fucking with us.
Yeah, this is the second one. He mentioned that it was the second one, but I don't actually remember a first one.
It's Inesha.
Oh, yeah, duh. Fair enough.
Yep. Yeah, this is... getting about to the point, like this is also very close to the book, because for listeners who don't know, I'm running a Rune Lords game in for my friends in Meat Space, and this book is very similar. So I am doing my best to keep my mouth shut and not be meta and spoilers, but that just kind of means I don't contribute to a lot of decisions, because I can't, if I do the thing that I know is right, then that's cheating, and if I do the thing that I know that's wrong, that seems unnecessarily penalizing. So I'll let Jimmy and you founder through it.
That kind of sucks.
I mean, it was part of, like, Enoch, particularly Enoch, and I knew what we were getting into when we got into it. And that's okay, I think. I think so, like, that I'd rather have the opportunity to play the game than have to sit on the sidelines just to avoid, being marginally bored for a little while.
See, I think the proper response to this almost, I think the proper response to this almost is to kind of have, like, the AP be changed.
Sure, I mean,
it's like kind of like a weird thing to say, but I have anybody watching Hell's Rebels, anybody who's listened to our podcast knows that I've changed a lot about how the AP works, kind of fundamentally from the book. So, someone reading the book, it's not all that actually helpful in you know what I mean? Like, most of the characters that have been introduced in Hell's Rebels so far are made up characters, right? The structure for the missions that you guys are undertaking, that's all me. I completely wrote out certain characters and added in others because of these kinds of changes that I wanted to make and everything like that. And I think that has the effect of, hey, listen, you could go read all the books that you want, but the context, the surrounding stuff is so different that it's not even going to really be all that helpful, because you're constantly going to be wondering, well, at this point, Bloody Bloop decides to betray, he decides to betray the Silver Ravens on cue, but there's actually no guarantee that kind of thing is going to happen given the other, drastic changes involved.
Sure, but, like, I think in this particular case, part of it is that, like, a lot of, I can recognize that a lot of the big story beats the same, but the details are different. And also, like, I'm never going to be capable of acting independent of that knowledge, right? Like, if, say, I know that's, like, there's one more this isn't such a huge deal. There's one more Black Arrow in the game right now than there is in the adventure path, right? One of the characters in the party does not appear in the Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path. And there's some other big differences too. And I know some things about the characters that could influence some of the decisions I make. There's no guarantee that they're the same, but, like, either I act on the information and it's bad information and I'm hurting us by, like, I there's no way for me to separate myself as a human being from the knowledge. Like, so long as that character exists there, I know something about that character. And whether or not that's true or not in this game, it's going to affect the decision somehow. And at the end of the day, I might as well just let somebody else make the decision, especially considering the Wooden Wanderer's motivations, right? Like, it's not like I'm refusing to go into the forest to avoid spoilers.
Huh. That I don't know. I don't necessarily think I have as hard a time. I feel like in the context of, I know the AP has been screwed with, it's easier for me to... Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess, because I know the AP has been changed, it's easier for me to kind of, like, ask questions along those kinds of lines without... You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel hamstrung because I know what happens in Fort Rannick and everything like that.
I don't know if I'd say I feel hamstrung. I just choose to step back. And also, like, there's also this other option where, like, if Mark decides he wants to run with fairly close to the adventure path so he doesn't have to do a lot of work on his own, which is, perfectly acceptable decision. Either if I act on the information and it's correct and he is running it close to the adventure path, then, I've screwed him over as a GM, or I force him to change it on the fly to not make it align with my expectations, and I don't want to put that burden on him. Right? Like, I don't want him to have to GM around the fact that I know what's going to happen based on having run the adventure path myself.
Isn't that kind of just what you get on the tin, though? Like, this is going to be the second time that Mark is... This is going to be... We all knew that we were walking into this kind of thing, and it just feels a little bit weird to me that the answer to this problem is to not engage with the material as much as you would otherwise. I don't know. It's a very weird thing. I think because
I think part of it too is maybe I stated it wrong, and maybe it seems like I'm overstating my lack of engagement, right? Like, I could still, like, talk to the townspeople. I could still do the things that I know is a safe space to operate in, or stuff that I know is, like, completely foreign to the AP. I just can't do several specific things that I know either indicates, one, that I know what's happening, or two, potentially, mucks with the game in that way. In the same way that as a good player, if I'm gonna bring this up, and this is an example of me kind of being a shitty player in this situation. But like when Bob, Steven, and El Zondo are the three suspects, and you could tell which one of those is the one that they wrote into the adventure path, and the other two are names made up on the spot. This is something I did in Nick's Kingmaker game. Like, I can choose to just ignore the fact that one of them is that one of them is obviously the correct answer. And since I know, like, it's the same type of thing, right? Except it's not obvious to everybody playing, and I could just let the other players take point on that particular conflict.
So, okay, so here's the thing. First of all, I would say that's bad GMing, just from the ground up.
Sure. And in some ways,
it obviously shouldn't be that obvious, right? But at the same time, I don't know. I guess the real thing that gets me almost is kind of this idea that I would say something, I would act here, but because of this, but because I've been through this before or whatever, I'm not going to. That is rough. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. Let me see.
It's also tough because, okay, so just to be clear, it's also tough because on the other half of this, you also have, would you say anything if you didn't know? You know what I mean?
Yes, so that is actually my biggest conflict, right? Like, let's say back in Sandpoint, just for something way in the past that I don't have to worry about spoiling anything. Say I knew that, like, I know that Aldern Foxglove is behind everything, right? Is behind the murders, right? Like, in the moment where we talk to Aldern Foxglove, I might there might be a tell there, but would I notice that if I didn't know that in the written adventure path that's what happens, right? Like, am I only noticing it because I know what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, the thing is, I definitely think that there are a mixture of, like, those moments or whatever, but I also think at the same time, when we're sitting there, trying to unravel this conspiracy, having characters be willfully silent, that's weird. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I think it's a mixture of both. I definitely see where you're coming from. I definitely agree with that principle. Kind of on both sides of this fence. It's definitely made me. See, it's tough being an adult, man. Like, it's tough being a grown up because
yeah, right?
I really want to do I really want to do my own campaigns from the ground up. Again, I really, I love doing that, but it's so much time and energy.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And it's so much time and energy, just like the little things. Today at work on my lunch break, I just, I just got something from the break room because I didn't really care. And I just sat there and I went through, I was going through these Hell's Rebels books, and I was, cutting out all of the character portraits and putting them in MS Paint and kind of like slicing out like the head or whatever and adding these characters to kind of Roll20, because, as I need to populate this world, I wanna seed in some people from later books that otherwise don't come up, right? I kind of like the idea that you're meeting major NPCs from books 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just like, hey, we walk into a bar. Here's this guy. If you happen to talk to, you know what I mean? Like, if you happen to talk to him, that's cool, kind of a thing. And just the ability for me to go through and do that for like 20 characters in an hour because they're all just kind of like laid out for me. That's the stuff that kills me about kind of like doing my own campaigns. I'm going to put a pin in that though, because that should totally be its own episode. 100%.
Yeah.
Anyways, what happened? What did we do in Hell's Rebels last week? You guys actually formed the
Golden Seals,
the
right?
Silver Ravens. Fuck you guys. You all get leprosy.
You asked us what the name.
I know, but I asked you with the obvious, like, oh yeah, I heard about the Silver Ravens or whatever. Because it's important that you're not. It's important that you're not, Beauregard and the Q's kazoos. You know what I mean? Like, there's a history to the Silver Ravens that there's a mystery there to kind of like solve and get to the bottom to, because it's all been redacted. Nobody knows, so it's legends and shit that comes up later. And so like if you call yourselves, the Goldie Hawns, we are in for some. It just fucks over lots of shit. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, you formed those guys, and then I gave you the plot hooks for the upcoming mission, so to speak. You chose Taylor Lewin, which I find incredibly interesting, for reasons I can't really talk about because they're a little bit spoilery. And then we had our first diplomacy challenge, which, to be honest, 100%. I am so happy with how that turned out. That was like
it worked well.
Like better than my wildest dreams.
Yeah, and I think it's actually neat for I as someone who I didn't think the system was ever bad. I just had my reservations about it. We have a good party for it, right? Like no one is trying to. I can imagine a group among our friends who play that would play diplomacy challenges to break them, but because we don't have that, I think they're going well.
100% agree. It was one of those things where I was really in my own head about it to that extent, right? Like I was so afraid of that outcome that I was just honestly surprised when the kind of the opposite happened, right? When people were answering, people were answering questions out of order and when it wasn't quote unquote like mechanically sound, and that stuff is great because I can make up for that on the back end, right? I can give you the, you know what I mean, like I can give Rakax the bonus he needs in order to make the you know what I mean, like in order to make that work and have him not be punished for. Like that's the last thing I want is I want somebody who like picks up on something and just goes with it and have it be a conversation where you're actually trying to convince this NPC player whoever to do what you need to do. I can make up for that stuff on the back end, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, I was really happy with that. I think that worked out pretty well. I was also scared personally because, even though I do a lot of prep work for this, just kind of like, like when I'm commuting to work, if somebody's like looking in my car, I must look really crazy because I'm sitting there like repeating these things, like that Barzillai Thrune speech. What I didn't actually write, I never wrote it down and made it like a word for word thing, but I just like said it out loud enough that I knew what I wanted to cover and stuff like that. But it's hard to anticipate stuff with that, like that for, for like a diplomacy check. I don't know what arguments you guys are going to make. I don't know, what you're going to bring up. I just kind of know who Lyra is and why she doesn't want, to like why she's hesitant about this, and I didn't want to and so I was just kind of afraid that because I would have to improv all of these answers, the conversation would be very stocky or slow, or we would get into one of those kinds of situations where you're constantly trying to convince someone who's already said yes, or she's finding really contrived reasons to not say to not say yes, but all of that stuff didn't happen. So
Yeah, no,
Very happy.
I was personally very happy because I got to use my quiet word power, although it didn't work as well as I had hoped. It is less powerful than I thought it was. I initially thought they got to roll with my bonus, but you only get to roll with my ranks, which is much less fun.
Yeah, to be honest, actually, I see. I'm kind of in a weird position where I think your character is almost a little overpowered for this game, in like just because how like it's really like disguise checks are so useful for keeping your notoriety down. I was like kind of looking over my stuff. And I was like, man, like Beauregard could just get out of all of this stuff because he could just use disguise checks. But yeah, when I originally read it, I thought the same way that you did. I thought that they rolled with your bonus. I don't know. Part of me wants to kind of almost like house rule that to be one way or the other, but
we'll figure it out as it goes on, right?
Yeah.
It seems to be working out for now. And in terms of the Beauregard's going to be overpowered, I'm pretty sure that you're going to see exactly how not that is the moment we face any sort of combat.
Yeah, sure. I'm just a lot of because a lot of this stuff is built to be dangerous from like a notoriety perspective, right? And we talked about this last week. The tension between do I intervene in this random beating on the street, right? But like it's my name and my face that's going to be doing that, and unless I kill these guys, unless I kill these guards or whoever, they're going to be able to report that back, and that's going to increase like the notoriety. And obviously that's still going to be true for all the other characters, so it's not like a huge deal or whatever. It's just I could see it in my mind.
Hey, how many times do you think I'm going to turn into Barzillai Thrune?
Yeah, oh God.
I just got that power too. Oh, I'm so happy.
The other thing is that like that kind of stuff like has a really hardcore predilection to like go off the rails. You know what I mean? If it's not something I have a ton of control over, obviously. So the worst case scenarios are definitely there.
Yeah, no, it'll be an interesting campaign, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm having a lot of fun with it. But yeah, what else has been happening in your week, buddy, besides the Dungeons and the Dragons?
Geez, not all that much. I've been playing this Iron Man XCOM game. To be honest, I'm kind of like done with XCOM, but I do want to see the ending. But like, I've kind of exhausted like the mechanical interest, I suppose, of the game, and so I want to complete it. I definitely want to complete it, but I've just kind of been a little bit lackadaisical about it. It seems like I got over the hump. With my Iron Man game, which makes me feel nice.
Yeah.
But and then I've been playing just like a ton of League with my really good friends who are really, really, really good. And I've finally stopped losing with them, so that feels good.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of XCOM, I'm probably going to dive back into that sometime this week because, as I've mentioned on a previous show, Super Best Friends are people I watch, and they just started an XCOM playthrough. I think you'd really enjoy it, actually, because they're playing a Commander Iron Man playthrough, and they're completely fucked. They haven't won a mission since the first one of like the 3 missions they've shown.
Wow, geez.
Like they've had to evacuate. They've lost all their soldiers. It looks like it's going to be a clusterfuck train wreck. It's going to end in 5 episodes. So I'm excited, and I'm extremely entertained by it. So I would recommend that to you and to all of our listeners.
Yeah, I should do that. I mean, I think it's funny because that's a little bit of like what happened in my first Iron Man playthrough. To a certain extent, I kind of hate like I went on the XCOM subreddit to just kind of like read about a bug I was having, and people were being such jerks about this guy not playing on Iron Man. And I was just like, come on. Like, first of all, I don't think the game is balanced for Iron Man. Like, 100%. I don't think the game is balanced for Iron Man. And second of all, I don't think it's the biggest deal for somebody to be a dirty save scummer. Even though I have walked
you
both
would say
paths.
That, you dirty save scummer.
I abandoned my save scumming. I've expanded my save scumming playthrough to play Iron Man.
Oh, you abandoned it? You didn't finish it?
Yeah, I never finished my. Well, because I kind of got to this place where, I hadn't done any of like the necessary story missions. I was just figuring out the mechanics and figuring out the mechanics and figuring out the mechanics. And then once I felt confident in the mechanics, I just went back and I started this new run. I started the new one on Iron Man normal, and I was doing pretty okay for a while. And then I just got hardcore fucked in a certain subset of missions. Mostly because, and I may have talked about this last week, mostly because my strategy was focused on leveling up a bunch of guys very quickly. I had a lot of, I had the thing where your wounded soldiers heal up faster. And so what it ended up happening was I had a core group of very, very high level guys and then like a bunch of squaddies. And then, I just had like 2 or 3 missions in a row where I lost like half of that high level group. And I just got, and then I failed a mission, and then I failed another mission, and it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. Because once I had lost those really high power guys, I didn't really have like the resources to kind of come back from that deficit. But in this one, I focused much more on breadth. So I have a lot of mid-level guys now. Compared to my first mission, or compared to my first playthrough. So when guys get hospitalized, when guys get dead, it's not the end of the world. And I've been able to come back from that.
Nice.
But yeah, how's Street Fighter going for you? Are you
Street Fighter is good. I'm getting mad at myself for dropping combos as we do. I've been trying to remember the infinitely wise words of Bob Ross. There's no such thing as a drop combo, just a happy little reset. Just
a happy little reset.
Yeah. It's an excellently made fighting game. Not much else I can say about that. Been playing exclusively Zangief. I have a couple of issues with so this is actually a really weird thing. It's that I see why they did it, but you select your preferred fighter, and then when you wait for a match, it just throws you into the match with that fighter. So it's actually a little bit more difficult to play different characters, right? It feels like you're very encouraged to play the same character over and over again, which isn't necessarily bad. It's just like in Street Fighter 4, where they had a roster of 44 characters at the end. I would play like a couple games on a bunch of different characters, and I have yet to play an online match with anybody that isn't Zangief. So it's just a different thing.
Fair enough. I don't know. It's I like games like that to a certain extent. Like I like the mastery, the mastery stuff in League of Legends. I think that's really great to encourage people to specialize. I think because League of Legends is really my only comparison point. I think that kind of stuff is important because you don't want it to be a content mill in that way, right? Where somebody you get your you get the new champion and then you play him a bunch and then you play him a bunch and then you throw that kind of stuff to the wind, right? I think it's better for when a champion or a fighter is mechanically deep enough that you can sit on him for matches on matches on matches on matches, and really kind of hone your craft. That's a symbol of really great design. and kind of one of the reasons why certain champions in League of Legends are poorly designed. Like Taric, right? Like what does a Taric main really have to offer?
Auras everywhere.
Yeah. Ugh. Can we talk about how poorly designed auras are in League of Legends? I can. Anyway, but we're actually here to talk about grinding. This is your topic, and I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I want to see where you're coming from before we get going in a more straightforward sense. What brought your thoughts of grinding about?
So, I actually forgot to mention this, but over the weekend, I also, in addition to the Division beta, played the Black Desert beta. And the Black Desert is a Korean MMO, which is a genre, specifically Korean MMOs, known for their propensity for grinding. But I found myself not too bothered by it. And I've found this variously in other different games, that like sometimes I get to it and I'm just like, I fucking can't stand this anymore. I'm done with this game. I just don't want to grind it out anymore. But in some games it just doesn't feel like it's a grind, right? It feels like it's meaningful. It feels like, it's not nearly so much of a problem, or like say in some cases in WoW, right, when you're looking for like some weird little trinket, it's like, well, I know what I'm going for is something exceptional, so I don't mind the grind so much. And so I kind of wanted to explore the space, which is like, what really differentiates a good grind, or a good feeling grind at least, and a bad grind. You can even apply this in some ways to League of Legends, right? Like, at what point is just playing games over and over again a grind, as versus like a fun thing to do type of deal?
Man, that's rough. So here's my thing about grinding. I think grinding is pretty shallow, but I also think that, in a way, I kind of think that it's like comparable to like shitty, mindless sitcoms in television, where like you can execute on that. I'm speaking specifically of like, laugh track, multi-camera, Big Bang Theory kind of stuff, right? I think you can execute well on that paradigm. I would even argue that to a certain extent, like the Big Bang Theory and, like How I Met Your Mother or whatever, kind of like the bigger names of these are like the best versions of that paradigm, but they are always, you're from a pure quality standpoint, you are always kneecapping yourself in that way, right? It's just like, I don't know, like I can't help but feel that all grinding is bad grinding qualitatively, but sometimes it's okay because what you're looking for is a grind. You know what I mean? You don't always need to be looking for The Wire, and like like the thematic and political challenges of, watching a super in-depth show like Game of Thrones or whatever. As much as I am a champion of that kind of stuff, I don't think that it's, I don't think it's universally necessary, right? I like to play thought-provoking fucking, well, I actually don't really like to play these thought-provoking adventure games for other reasons, but, like the thought-provoking indie adventure games that have a lot of depth and meaning and all that kind of stuff. But, like, at the end of the day, when I've been working and I'm tired and I'm worn out, like, yeah, who cares? It feels fine to sit in Diablo and farm through Nephilim rifts, because even though it's blatantly Skinnerbox bullshit, that I'm just, like pulling the crank over and over and over again, hoping that new legendary loot is going to drop or whatever, I kind of just don't care, because that's what the grinding is for. It's kind of like there to turn my brain off. So from that perspective, I don't even really know that I think there is good or bad grinding in like the truest sense. I kind of feel like all grinding is bad, but in some instances I'm fine with it, and in others it just doesn't appeal to me. That's how I feel about it.
I got paused for a second when you said that The Big Bang Theory is a good show, but this isn't a television podcast, so we'll table that discussion.
I'm not saying here's the thing. I'm not saying it's a good show. I'm just saying it's the best of what. There's obviously really bad multi-camera laugh track sitcoms, right? The jokes don't land. You know, the plots are rote and they're trite or whatever. But you know, The Big Bang Theory and and How I Met Your Mother, or you know, maybe like Friends, I guess if we want to go back in time. Technically Seinfeld had a laugh track, but I don't really think that kind of counts in this like subgenre.
Well, see, I know what you're talking about, but I take exception to The Big Bang Theory being a good version of one of those shows. But again, this isn't a television podcast.
I'm just saying, like,
yes,
the good version of Big Bang Theory is still bad television when measured against The Wire, right? In fact, this is actually, to be topical for a second, this is a lot of how I feel about Deadpool, right? The good version, Deadpool is good for, you know, what it is, but it is blatantly, you know, it's blatantly a bad movie, right? Like, it's all cliches and all of that stuff because on purpose, right? That makes it a bad movie, but it's fine. You know, that's what it's trying to accomplish, so it's okay to kind of, you know, it's okay. And I think that's the same kind of principle at play.
I'm going to say that I disagree that it's a bad movie, but we're not going to get into it. This is not a movie podcast. But I just couldn't.
I will one day. I will break you and we'll do that.
No. I have no problem getting into it at some point. But I just didn't. I can't let your opinion go uncontested completely. But we won't argue about that right now. But about grinding, I think that they're like, in some senses I think that you're right, that like there are some, that in a lot of ways the grind, or rather what people view as an acceptable grind, like say Nephilim riffs, are not really great. They're just good things to do with your brain turned off. And I would argue specifically for say like Diablo style ones. Like there is actually some nuance there, some challenge there, and like figuring out what you can do easily, what you can do with a little bit more effort, and like kind of like optimizing those grinds, which I think is its own little kind of like neat mini game in kind of like a management game type sense. Okay. But I think on another level there are some grinds that even kind of transcend that level of goodness, right? Like I think there are game like I said, Black Desert seems to have stuck out at me, but I only played it for like maybe 5 or 6 hours this weekend, so maybe it would have fallen off with me had I continued playing it. But I felt like over the course of that game, the act of killing monsters, while an incredibly kind of like Diablo-esque activity, didn't feel bad, and in many ways felt good. Like I think part of that in particular is because of the combat system in that game, that it's either keyboard or controller based kind of like action combat type stuff, and so it felt like every combat was like a fight, right? Like if you're playing through say like a character action game, like say like Devil May Cry, is fighting through the packs of enemies in that game, is that a grind? Is fighting enemies in Shadows of Mordor or in Assassin's Creed a grind? And at what point does it become a grind? Is it just because you could do it over and over again to gain XP? If you don't have those rewards and it's just like you can go through it to like get an A in the level, or just to advance the plot, does it suddenly magically make it not a grind? Like I feel like there's a very blurry line there that like where like what looks like a grind can have a lot more depth than that, and it is in some ways like a lot better than you're giving it credit for.
Man, how do I feel about that? I kind of agree. This is obviously a little bit personal. So this is my history with grinding. I actually like grinding more than the average folk, I suppose. I think that it's like from that like turning your brain off perspective, I think that's almost proper. I think that's what grinding asks you to do. Right now, I'm playing World of Warcraft, and, I'm playing World of Warcraft for a variety of reasons, most notably of which is that I like to roleplay in World of Warcraft, and a bunch of my friends are roleplaying in World of Warcraft, and it's fun to do that, right? But I do still find myself sitting, literally, this is not a joke, I find myself sitting on my level 35, Pandaren monk leather worker. I have leveled him up almost entirely by just sitting in areas farming beasts so I can skin them because I'm leveling leatherworking, and just the amount of leather that you need in order to level up leatherworking is just obscene. So I'm just sitting, and I've done that for hours at this point. I've probably done that for days in just like raw, raw volume of time. But it's fine because, on my second screen, I have, Man of Steel. I have Pacific Rim. I have, some TV show that I'm catching up on or whatever. So that, I can kind of be in those two places at once. I can't do that in League of Legends, right? Though sometimes I do it, to be honest. Because, you need to be focused so hard on League in order to, play it properly. I can't do that in Mass Effect, right? Because it just wouldn't, I'm too engaged. I can't even do that in something like XCOM, which can get grindy in some of its, once you've figured out, the mechanics, so to speak, it can get kind of grindy, which is a little bit of the place that I'm at. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like that turn your brain off perspective is the right...
Is this? I hate to bring it back to definitions. But this may be us talking about two different concepts, and you saying that what the thing you're describing isn't actually grinding, as far as I see it. Because it sounds like to me that the way you define grinding is an activity that you turn your brain off and do repetitively. Whereas I'm saying, well, it's a repetitive activity, but it doesn't necessitate turning your brain off.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not saying it necessitates that. I'm just saying I think that's the best. I kind of think that's the best execution of it. There are some even in Diablo, right? Diablo, I actually don't think. I think Diablo is grinding, and it is grindy in this certain in the same way. I did this before I was playing WoW again. I was playing Diablo in the same way, right? I'm just grinding Nephilim rifts over and over again. But what you're recognizing is, which I think is super right and super fair, is that it's grinding surrounded by capstones of interesting mechanics, right? And so, yeah, I'm grinding these Nephilim rifts with my Whirlwind Warrior, who I basically just right-click and move around the dungeon or whatever. But, then I come out of it, I evaluate my loot, I'm looking at what the numbers say, what's better, what's worse, can I make a new build out of this? Let's try out this new build or whatever, right? And even trying out the new build, I mean, I guess it kind of has a little bit of, can I execute this spamming of Hammer of the, you know what I mean? Maybe can I avoid the arcane lasers on the ground is difficulty and execution kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the build works or it doesn't, right? I either die a bunch or I don't die a bunch, and that's and I just kind of keep grinding to figure out what's what. And I think that's also true of World of Warcraft. There are plenty of times when I'm just sitting there farming these boar butts or whatever, but there are also plenty of times when I get together with a group of people and we're, doing a raid where I can't, I can't back out from that in the same way.
Yeah, so you just, I'll agree with you that, you can have a good turn your brain off grinding situation. But does that necessarily mean that's the only way to have a good grinding situation?
I don't think it's the only way. I'm sure there are plenty of turn your brain off grinding situations that are bad, because I think there's also pieces to this that are how if Diablo was 20 hours of Nephilim rifts, if a Nephilim rift took 20 hours, right? It would be bad because the rate at which the loot would drop would be obscenely slow. Right?
Yeah, let's say the drop rate was about 100 times slower and there was a real money auction house. That would be a much worse game, don't you say?
Yes, I would say that. And I think that's what we're. I think that's almost a little bit of like what we're addressing is a lot of this stuff kind of comes down to like the rate of reward, right? The Skinner box doesn't work if it rewards food too infrequently.
Sure.
Though the Skinner box also doesn't work if you reward food on every pull, so
Yeah.
that's why RNG exists. That's why RNG exists, ladies and gentlemen. Also that, and because sometimes reacting to new situations is important. I hate how people don't like RNG. I think it's like a secret pet peeve of mine.
I think we can even launch into that a little bit, but I think RNG is like, I think there's a balancing point there. Like, I feel like, if I put in, however many hours into something and, RNG is screwing me, I feel like that can get a little frustrating too, right? It's something like Diablo, where like getting your base 6 pieces of the set you want is so incredibly important to playing the build that you want to play. Not being able to get those pieces is incredibly infuriating. Or getting any 6 pieces, even if you wanted to reduce to that point, right? Like, I'm not saying, it should be easy to get all 6 pieces ancient with perfect stats. Obviously, that's not the case. But like, I do feel like there is a point when RNG could feel frustrating, and that's not great.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's a thing, but at the end of the day, I kind of think that stuff is almost a little bit, it's like outliery to me, because at the end of the day, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it takes some players more time, some players less time. Your famous penchant for getting legendary follower items in Diablo 3, yeah, that's frustrating. I get that, but it's kind, like, that's bad, but it's overweighed by the good of the system being that, you sometimes are rewarded. You're sometimes rewarded with stuff you expect, sometimes with stuff you're not expecting, right? I had to make do with the Firebird or Firebrand mage set because I just couldn't get anything from the Archon set to drop. But that actually became really cool because I got to, Like, I got to experience, even though I knew on paper, and even though I kind of think the on-paper version of this is kind of the wrong way to play Diablo, even though I knew on paper the Archon set was better for like the DPS calculations and all of the crazy, all of the crazy stuff on like people who spreadsheet it out or whatever. But, I just couldn't be bothered because the RNG was fine and it gave me an interesting experience. RNG exists in games like XCOM, by the way, just to kind of like complete my point. People who gotta get mad that, like a soldier with a 95% chance to hit and miss. It's like, yeah, that's what RNG is there for, right? RNG is there to make you think on your toes, right? I
would counter that point though. Did you know that there are hidden modifiers in XCOM 2? If you miss a bunch in a row, your hit chance is actually higher than is what's stated on the screen, and if the enemy hits you a bunch of times in a row, their miss chance actually goes up as well.
Woo! How do I feel about that? That's something that I have thoughts on this. I don't have thoughts on this. I'm stalling. I will have I will have thoughts on this when we do a proper XCOM episode. Maybe next week kind of thing. But that I think that RNG is important because you need to. You need to be able to account for, you need to be able to think on your feet. You need to be able to deal with random stuff that you weren't expecting on the fly. Because if everything, falls down in precisely the way that you expected it, I think that experience is boring. And the difficulty of that experience is low. And I think RNG is a good way to flavor the experience in a different way. By the way, I also think RNG is like, Civilization is a game that comes down a lot on how you're expecting, right? It's not like you have a mischance on your archers or whatever, right? Or, it's not like you, don't know. It's not like you're building a library and then on the last turn of the library, it turns into an aqueduct. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I think there's good places for RNG, specifically in Civilization. It's stuff like the ruins, the archaeology. I think it's stuff like the map, right? Like the RNG nature of the map is a great asset to Civilization, and that's the way that it makes you think on your toes, right? Because you don't know what the continent necessarily looks like on turn 10, that kind of thing.
Sure, but
so there's
is
different
that a
places
problem?
for it.
Is that a problem if it keeps the game from being competitive? Like, well, to bring it back to Diablo a little bit, there are like leaderboards for certain like beyond highest cleared rifts. I think highest cleared rifts is something that you can push out with enough time. Like that'll mitigate the RNG, but things like first to clear X, Y, and Z is going to be very heavily dependent on RNG. And something like the map position in the ruins in Civilization, like I don't think you could have a competitive Civilization scene in the way you have a competitive League of Legends or Street Fighter scene. Putting aside the time component, because of those random elements, right? Like the best Civ player in the world, if they're handed like Venice on a landlocked map, is going to be like completely screwed.
Well, first of all, I'm just going to point out that Civ compensates for that. I actually don't know that you can be Venice without, like, it has a coastal starting bias, is my point. Anyway, I actually think that, so people, this argument gets brought up, specifically in League of Legends, with Critical Strike, and comparing it to comparing it to other games, right? People say things like, "Oh, there's no critical strike in baseball or whatever," and it's like, okay, I understand the idea, but that's just fundamentally not true, right?
Yeah,
because there's so much going on in baseball.
And
whether somebody hits
sports have their own weirdness to them, right? Like,
right? You know what I mean? Like it's like listen, I agree with you. Peyton, Eli Manning, I'll take that. There you go. Eli Manning, just gets to, he gets to throw this, he throws the football and he knows where it's going to go. And he has these, you know what I mean? Like, and that's very measured. It's very skill based or whatever. Right. But like, listen, man, like sometimes the guy's sweating and he happened to rub his arm and got a little sweat on his glove, you know what I mean? And then, the random,
or it's
random
raining.
shit. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or it's raining, right? Or it's, somebody's girlfriend broke up with him and he had a bad fucking, you know what I mean? Like, that stuff is functionally RNG.
Right.
And so I actually think that League of Legends, like, on balance, compared to a lot of these physical sports, is probably less RNG than the sports are. Just because, there's so much more, there's just so much more randomness when it's not a computer simulation, right? That's just like that's a fundamental principle. But I get the point. I think that season 4 of League of Legends, TSM beat CLG because Wild Turtle had what, like, you could literally freeze frame it. He had one crit on like one champion that just kind of snowballed the entire, you know what I mean, like the entire game to a win, right? And that won them game 4, and they rallied and they used that momentum to win game 5 to, upset Cloud9, who were the, like the heavy favorites or whatever. And you could, if you were being reductive and simplistic, you could bring it all the way down to that one crit, right? And you could say, ha, this point of RNG is the only reason, how is this competitive? The only reason they won is because of that RNG. And it's like, I see where you're getting at, but the bigger picture of it is that point of RNG, was capitalized on correctly. It gave them the right mindset that they needed, all of these different things, that come together, that the RNG, I just don't think is the determining factor there, right? That kind of stuff happens all the time in League of Legends. And unless it's, I guess, particularly egregious, unless it's so egregious that I can't even think of an example. And I've been following the League of Legends competitive scene since basically its inception. It's just, it doesn't matter. That kind of stuff, it doesn't matter. Oh, I actually can't think of one. There was one
game where C9 got beat because the other team crit 3 times in a row. Like
that's 100% what I'm thinking of. Dignitas versus Cloud9 on 20% crit. I think I'm a Cutie Pie crit 3 times in a row on like Caitlyn or like on Draven or somebody, and just kind of happened to, you know what I mean? Just kind of happened to get a kill. And the best part about that was after the game, I am a Cutie Pie got on Twitter and said something to the effect of, "Guys, listen, we shouldn't have won that game. I got 3 magic crits." But yeah, so I think that's the only time ever that it's been that egregious.
To bring up more hidden multipliers, I League of Legends also smooths crits.
I agree. Or I know that, yeah.
Actually,
but the thing is, my point is, I think just because Cloud9 lost that one game, they didn't, like on balance, they didn't lose the season. I think this was in season 3, by the way. They didn't lose the season. I think they went on to ace basically the playoffs. They never had any problem with any, they never had any problem with any of that. And I think that the RNG is so little that it's not determining whether or not Samsung Galaxy White wins Worlds, right? It's maybe determining maybe one game out of hundreds. So
sure. But does the game not suffer for that? Like, even if it's such a minute thing that affects 1 in every 100 games, why not make it 0 out of 100 games?
Because I think crit does add. Because I think it does add positive stuff. I think like having to react to, having to react to bad RNG, having to react to good RNG is a part of good. That's part of what makes games interesting. Maybe you could argue that for the LCS specifically, maybe you could convince me to drop that to 0 entirely. But I think that, like, under the principle of the LCS fundamentally is playing the exact same game as, like, code-wise, as, the folks at home or whatever, that 1%, I think that 1% makes the folks at home version of the game worse, because even though
I agree that League of Legends should be like pro and home play, if not for like sports reasons, for Riot's marketing reasons, should be exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I think that's a valid perspective to have. It's one that I've, I think there's merits to that. I've made that argument before, even though I don't necessarily believe in it. It's a valid argument to make, that like you can swap that. I think this has come up in the past regarding stuff like lane swaps, right? Like highly technical play around stuff like lane swaps. The argument basically goes something along the lines of, well, the pros are going to figure out how to game the system. They're going to play this lane swap game, which nobody at home is going to play anyway. So you might as well make small changes to you might as well make small changes to that specific lane swap situation only for LCS games, because it has the artificial effect of making the pros play more like the folks at home, right? It's kind of counterintuitive because, you're saying, well, we're going to change the game fundamentally from what it is for the folks at home in order for the pros to more accurately resemble what's going on for the folks at home. But I think that argument holds a certain amount of water, even though, I don't personally subscribe to it. And I think the counter argument is overall stronger.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, like, if you can't tell, I'm mostly kind of playing devil's advocate at the moment, but, I'm going to ask you a question in the opposite direction, because this is actually an interesting argument presented to me a number of years ago, by a friend, one Dungeon Mike, about what was wrong with League of Legends, and that's that League of Legends damages are static. In Dota and in Heroes of Newerth, those damages are arranged, right? Like from 12 to like 16 or something. Standard RPG style. Your damage isn't a fixed number; it's a range. And he argued at that point in time that that is necessary in order to keep the laning phase interesting and fair, because occasionally it allows things to go weird in one direction or another. And they removed that from League of Legends. Every shot, barring critical hits, of course, does a static amount of damage. Doesn't that kind of run counter to the point that you were talking about reacting to bad RNG?
I think that to a certain extent, it's included in the... Well, so first of all, there are places where that principle doesn't hold up straight away. Anybody who's played an execute champion, right, has seen this principle at play, right? Because most of the executes in League of Legends are designed such that it does X% more damage based on the percentage of missing health, right? So let's say I'm playing Volibear, whose W is a pretty obvious execute. My Volibear W does... I can even just look this up because I have the internet at my disposal. My Volibear W is always going to do 30... Wow, really? That's it? Oh, no, never mind. It's always going to do, at rank 5, it's always going to do 260 plus 15% of my bonus health. So let's say I have, I don't know. Let's say I have a giant belt and I have 1,000 extra HP, right? So it's going to do 150 extra damage, right? So 150 plus 260, 410 damage. It's going to be 400. It's going to be 410 damage on whoever this person is, right? But it's an execute, so that damage is going to be increased by 1% for every 1% of the target's missing health. So, is that Darius at 50% HP? Is he at 45% HP? That's a pretty big difference as far as, as far as my 410 damage is concerned. That's functionally RNG in the same way. But the other thing about it is that in League of Legends, the damages are so, the minutia is, even though it is static, and it behaves static as far as the computer is conditioned, I think the systems are kind of arcane enough, and nobody is that good at the math on the fly that it functionally it functions in the way that Dungeon Mike is describing. Champions get armor as they level, and the armor is going to reduce the amount of damage they take by a weird percentage, and there's stuff like masteries and runes that people don't necessarily see to have more armor, to have less armor. So it's less easy for me to predict each one of my Caitlyn shots is going to do 73 damage without me doing a bunch of just arcane math behind the scenes in order to come to that conclusion, if that makes sense. So I think in general the systems are obscured enough to make that effect relatively it's consistent enough to be consistent, which I think is what from a game field perspective people want to find, but it's inconsistent enough that it's not, as Dungeon Mike would describe, entirely like boring or whatever.
Okay.
Or like uninteresting.
That's fair. That's right. I think that makes sense. I think I agree with that. With none of us are computers enough to be calculating all of this on the fly, to be able to accurately use all this information at our disposal, even though it's technically there.
And to be honest, hey, listen, man, I want to be. I am that computer in a lot of senses. I know so many like numbers minutia about the game that did you know, Twisted Fate's ultimate is, 5,500 units, but, Tom Kendra's ultimate scales up from 4,000 units to 5,500. You know what I mean? Like that kind, you just like random stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know,
Speaking of random minutia in League of Legends, I meant to bring this up earlier, like way at the beginning of the podcast, but we actually had a question from a listener, from a
loyal listener,
listener. Yeah, his name is Chucksatani Phil, is what it says. And
that's funny.
And he was asking about he was asking about how in League of Legends specifically that when you cast I believe it's only for skill shot missile attacks, the range is actually slightly longer than the indicator indicates. This is confirmed by Riot Gypsy on a Reddit post. I can link that post in the description so everyone can see. And I've been thinking about this for a little while because Chuck Satani obviously asked us this back when we posted the skill episode, which was 2 episodes ago at this point.
Yeah, because last week was races.
Yeah, to me at least, I feel like that falls into the same kind of set as the Yasuo ult thing we were talking about, which is that while you may or may not feel that the added bonus of timing your Yasuo ult to get maximum knockup on a person, like, the value of that skill is debatable. The need for the responsiveness on it for when you do need to use it immediately, or when you would want to use it immediately, and the feel of it makes it so that's important. I feel like the same thing is true for the range indicators. As I will quote Riot Gypsy here. Let me actually bring up the quote because I brought up the conversation. The display range is not the true range, which is coded onto the spell in a harder to access area. Display ranges are what the targeting indicator shows, and we tend to make them slightly shorter than the true range of the spells, make the spells feel more reliable since missiles have travel time. Jinx's W's true range is 1500, for example, but the display range is 1450. And in my mind, I feel like that makes sense, right? Like the ability to kind of that sounded really weird, but like the ability to kind of feel like you're just kind of like reaching for it and then to get it. I think that's a positive thing.
I mean, honestly, this is like completely unapplicable to my experience with the game because I smartcast everything. I guess maybe something like Xerath counts. Like Xerath and Vi and God, what's that champion?
Nautilus.
Varus, who you charge up these. What do Xerath, Vi, and Nautilus have in common?
Skill shots with missile speeds.
Okay, well,
no. So
it's funny. Okay.
Yeah, no. This particularly, I know exactly how this feels. In particular, because I play a lot of Nautilus, as you well know, buddy. I think part of it too is specifically with Nautilus hurt by the fact that if you connect, the anchor kind of jumps so that it's embedded in the target, including in walls, and so it looks even further than it actually is because it's like almost like the tip of it. It'll like lodge itself halfway into the structure or the hero. Right. But yeah, to continue with your point before I distracted you with silliness.
Man, you did distract me hardcore with that silliness. I smartcast everything, so I never see the effect of this, right? Because the only time I would see the effect of this is if I play Varus, Xerath, and Vi, who naturally, as you charge up some of their maneuvers, they do gain a skill shot indicator. But even then, I don't play those champions long enough.
Xerath's Q is what you're talking about, right? The Varus Q, or the Xerath Q.
The Xerath Q, yeah.
That doesn't have a travel time, though, does it?
It has like it has a cast time.
No, it has a cast time, but the missile doesn't travel, right? Like,
oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah, the Varus Q missile travels.
Yes, yeah, and the Vi does as well.
Vi her a missile, it travels.
Yeah.
I never see the effect of this kind of thing, so I can't really comment on. I think kinesthetically, but by the way, kinesthetics is what I'm going to use for the term game feel because I think that's a poor term in general. Kinesthetically, I have no sense whether or not that kinesthetically feels better or worse, right? But I do think that, this is kind of one of those situations where I just kind of have to trust Riot. They've done the research and everything like that. And even though this reads a lot to me like the thing we were talking about with Blink Dagger, where if you do it in the right range, you get farther, but if you overstep that range, you go significantly shorter. It kind of feels a little bit like that to me. Like not 1-to-1, but like they're almost related.
They're cousins.
In that it's yeah, exactly. Like they're cousins. And it just feels, I don't know, it just feels really weird. So, maybe he's right. Something that I thought might be the case, and I obviously don't have the wording in front of me, thought might be the case is that, like, the skill shots in League of Legends taper off to a point, and maybe that tapering is what he means by that 50 units, so that, like, most skill shots are rectangles, right? Most of them don't taper off into a point, right? So it will just, even if let's say I'm overlapping you, you're standing still, I'm standing still, I am overlapping you, I'm not overlapping you at all with the skill shot indicator, but you are still, but that's just a trick of the visual of the design of the skill shot indicator, because it tapers off. It doesn't just look like a big rectangle block, right? Maybe that's what he's describing. I don't know. I don't know. I have nothing useful to add to this.
No, I mean that's fair, and I think I agree with you that it's like I said, like the same thing that made me stop and say that the Yasuo ult timing didn't feel like good skill to me, kind of is overridden. Like I think in like a very pure sense, it's not great skill, right? Like if you're only considering it from the skill sense, but when you consider it in the larger context of the whole game, I think it's fine.
To be honest, I was yesterday. Everyone get ready to congratulate me. I'm really gonna blow your minds here. Yesterday, I was in my promo series for Silver fucking 2, and I was sitting there, and I was like, who should I play? And I was playing with a bunch of my friends, and they were like, dude, just play Yasuo. You know what I mean? Like, and honestly, that was a really stupid idea, because we were playing an all AD comp into a Malphite, but they were basically like, listen, Yasuo's your favorite champion, Yasuo's your best champion, just play Yasuo, you'll have more fun, you know what I mean? Like, you'll have more fun, we trust in your Yasuo skill kind of thing, so it was great. And as I was, as I was playing Yasuo that game, I haven't played him in like a little bit because I took a big break from the game and I came back, and I've been playing other champions in general. And I just kind of, and I did this thing where, sometimes you throw out the tornadoes and you're not sure if they're going to hit or not, right? Like when you haven't been playing him enough. So there was this one point in the late game, we're sieging, I'm getting stacks a little bit, and I just kind of like haphazardly threw a tornado, and it just so happened that the enemy Ezreal like walked into the tornado, and I was almost like, what? I hit the Ezreal? And then I was like, oh my god, I need to ult, you know what I mean? And so I just like spammed the R, and I got the same effect as that, the skill thing that we're talking about, right? I didn't expect to hit that, but I ended up getting like the optimal amount of knock-up time, just because I was honestly bad, which I think is
you needed the second of reaction time.
Because I needed that extra reaction time in order to properly process what had just happened, and I kind of think secretly that's the other half of it. Yeah, when I know that I'm going to hit a knock-up, it's better for me to let it go and then, you know what I mean, let it go for the full duration and then hit my ultimate, right? But it's also better for, the hyper underskilled player who needs the extra, you know what I mean? Like, it rewards the hyper under.
Yeah.
It actually, it disproportionately targets moderate players.
Oh,
right?
You're right.
You know what I mean?
Man.
Because for a moderate player, they know that the knockup is going to hit, but they're not doing the thing that the smart player does, like the really good player does, where they wait. They hit it instantly. So in a weird way, it kind of has like a flattening effect on Yasuo's skill cap and skill range, which I think is a really, really, really interesting kind of phenomenon.
Yeah, no, that's pretty. Oh man, that's pretty great.
I think there's a certain amount of I think there's a certain amount of stuff in the game that reflects that almost.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's a little bit like Daigo, to bring it back to Street Fighter V. It's a little bit like Daigo and
Lupe
Fiasco, where, you know, the Diamond player who plays against Bronzies can't be anticipated. He's so bad that you just have no idea what he's going to do.
You mean the other way around, the Bronzy that plays against Diamonds?
Wait, what did I say?
You said the Diamond that plays against Bronzies.
Yeah, the Diamond that plays against Bronzies. The Diamond player can't anticipate a Bronze player's badness.
You said can't. It's not important, but it sounded backwards. Anyway,
fair enough. Yeah, the Diamond player can't anticipate you know what the. Randomly, I guess this is technically a game, so it's not that much of an aside. I used to play professional Magic the Gathering. I wasn't very good, but I would go to like Pro Tour qualifiers and stuff like that. And it was so funny because of how tailored my decks were for the meta, right? You know, like I knew that blue-white control was that was what we had seen most often, right? But blue-white control loses to goblins, right? And so I made a green-white control deck that would rampant growth, Wrath of God on turn 3, and I destroy all of their goblins, rather than waiting until turn 4, which a blue-white control deck would have to do because there's no ramp in blue or white, but there's ramp in green. And I would always get wrecked. Just like hardcore wrecked by like, you know, like the little like 7-year-old kid who showed up with his like beast deck. And you know what I mean? Like where he bought a bunch of like the pre-made, you know, like the pre-made decks or whatever, and he would just like play these beasts, and it's just like, I don't have enough removal. Why are you dropping 7/7s? What is going on? You know, like those kinds of things. And I think that's a very real phenomenon that happens in a lot of these kinds of situations where the super underskilled the super skilled player is as much skilled because of his mastery of the game, if from like a mindset perspective and a mastery of the meta, compared to the underskilled player who is exploiting the fact that the hyperskilled player does not, he doesn't play Crozen Beast, which is an 8/8 for 4 mana under the right circumstances. I may just be salty that I lost to that little kid.
Well, they kind of bring it back to they bring it back to grinding. What is ostensibly the topic of this episode, although I think we've talked about it for all of 10 minutes.
I feel like we should rename this podcast to Some Derps Talk About Games, but in a very, very loose sense with lots of tangents.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we always wanted to do with the cast, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Anyway, to kind of bring it back, do you feel like doing things like say training in training mode? Do you feel like that's grinding, like grinding out like combos?
Oof. I guess I haven't done that in honestly a really long time. I guess I did it for Soul Calibur 2.
What about if you had a sandbox, buddy?
Oh God, we talked about sandbox one on the cast, right?
I think we must have.
Yeah, I see. I have mixed feelings about this kind of stuff. I think it's pretty necessary in general for fighting games because that's like the required gameplay of fighting games. But I definitely think basically the thing that has convinced me about sandbox modes versus training modes is Riot basically said the best way to get better at League of Legends should be loading up a match of Summoner's Rift against other players and playing League of Legends, right? That, you know what I mean? Like that, like. So, not in every case. Yeah, sure. If the first time you play Yasuo, play him against bots, right? Sure, that's fine. Load up a custom, maybe. That's why those game modes exist. But I don't think that there's the necessity of a sandbox mode so that you can sit on one of the walls and constantly spam flashes to train, quote unquote, train your ability to flash over that wall. I don't think that's what. I don't think that's very good.
So I think that's a valid point from Riot says that should be the case, but if that should be the case, doesn't that mean that should a sandbox mode exist, that would be the case, and that's not really an argument against the existence of a sandbox mode. That's an argument that LoL should be designed so that's the case, that the existence of a sandbox mode shouldn't even matter. right? By denying the sandbox mode, all they're kind of doing is admitting, well, that's not the case, but if we don't let you practice, then we can kind of close our ears and pretend.
It's a good counter argument. Well, whatever the case may be, I also think it's not. I also think that from a, I think that the opposite, like the other thing that is like from a business concern.
Sure.
I don't think adding sandbox mode just for the the sake of.
Oh, sure. No. Absolutely. I think you're absolutely correct there, and I think they have a vested interest, and I think it's a valid interest in keeping the game accessible. I just think that sometimes their arguments are meant to kind of mask that intention, which is what it is.
I mean, I think the argument holds water in. Honestly, I kind of think that it's. I think that it kind of comes down to who you agree. You know what I mean? Like, I'm willing to take right on faith that I do agree with that principle in general. But I think that there is, there is another way to look at it, and that's just fine. Two people can look at the exact same set of evidence and come to radically different conclusions. I don't think that that's that bad. League of Legends isn't science.
Yeah, that's true. Well, any other thoughts on grinding, buddy?
I really like grinding. I really do. I love it. Because as much as I'm a video game guy, I'm sure you people know this because I try and deflect by talking about television and movies all the time. I watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of movies. I like being up on, TV. I mean, like, the amount of times that I've watched so many movies is because it would be boring for me to watch, Man of Steel twice in the same month if I didn't have the option of kind of tuning in and out based on my ability to just sit there and grind in World of Warcraft or in Diablo, right? And so that's why I like grinding, and I think that it's kind of a good thing. But that's personal. I definitely don't get mad at people who call certain. I don't think everything should be a grind. I don't think there should be grind.
Sure.
I specifically don't think there should be grinds in story-based games. I think that's nope, no way. That's bad. 100% bad.
Oh man, so do you hate all JRPGs?
Yeah, basically as almost a rule. I think the best JRPGs that I've played are Pokemon games, and Pokemon games don't feel very grindy to me.
Huh.
So there are very specific instances where grinding is okay in Pokemon games. If sitting on the Elite Four and grinding out 5 or 6 attempts at the Elite Four before you beat it that 6th time, that is technically grinding, but it actually, for the player, it's a good thing, I think, because That creates like an emotional reaction. You know what I mean? Like, you're working at something and you're failing, but you're getting marginally better each time you try. And then on that one try, like, you break the dam and you get it right. That feels great, and that is a result of grinding. But I think it's important that really only exists at one point in the game, because I don't think Pokemon games are all that grindy. You can grind in the game if you want to be an Eevee trainer, I suppose. I know what that's like. I've done that shit because I'm crazy. I have a problem, Mango.
What, do you not have a Pokerus?
No, I actually don't have a Pokerus, but I just I know what it's like to like Eevee train and like farm eggs for the appropriate combination of nature and you know what I mean? Like you're oh man, I really want to. I don't even remember what they're called. Like bold Rhyperior. So I have to keep farming for I have to keep farming eggs for Rhyhorns with bold and a specific a specific trait. Like, anyway, it's just I don't know. I don't really like JRPGs as a rule.
Huh. Well, there you have it. With like 5 minutes left in the cast, we've got a stinging condemnation of one of the most popular genres out there. Yeah, I think I'm going to say that, like, I think that's actually kind of what I was looking for in this, is that, like, I think there are ways to do it right? Like, I think that there are times when a grind, so long as, like, I'll bring up, say, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which is one of my favorite. It's a tactical JRPG, so it's different. But I think that the scenarios are varied enough there that I never, like, there were times when I didn't have to run missions to advance to get high enough to advance, but I wanted to, right? Like, I wanted my character to be more powerful because I wanted this technique or whatever. So I went and I just ran some side missions instead of doing the main story mission.
See, okay, so this doesn't speak to me. That does not sound like grinding to me. This is a little bit like XCOM. This is a little bit like XCOM because, yes, hypothetically, and this is something I did in XCOM, right, where I kept waiting and waiting to do these story missions, and because I want to level up my guys and have them be the best that they can be before going, crazy, before going nuts, in like for the story or whatever. But because the game is procedurally generated, right, and because it's content I've never seen before necessarily, I don't think that's a grind, right? So if you're playing Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, as long as you're not repeating the same mission over and over and over again, I don't know if that's a thing that you can do. But I don't think it's grindy.
But you're still repeating side missions. Like, some of them are the exact same mission, but it's not like they're not like, it's not like you do like the same one mission over and over again. But then again, in Diablo, right, like no two rifts are the same, but we'd still consider that a grind.
Yeah, I guess I don't know enough about Final Fantasy Tactics Advance.
Sure, I mean, but
to really make the comparison.
But I think it's valid when you talk about it in terms of XCOM too, right? Like, you're running a number of side missions and intentionally ignoring the main story mission, in an attempt to make your people better rather than advancing the plot. Right? Does that qualify as a grind to you?
Yeah, that doesn't qualify as a grind to me. In this, but like, I definitely understand that line is that line is hardcore blurry, right? I don't think. Oh God, I had a great example for this offhand, but now I can't. Okay. So I don't think that that in XCOM is grindy, right? But on the sliding scale of, I don't know, what's like the least grindy game I can think of? Probably Mass Effect 2. See, not even that though.
Walking Dead.
Sure. Yes, sure, fine. Yes. On the sliding scale of zero grind for The Walking Dead to tons of grind, see, I don't play these games, so I don't really World of Warcraft, fine. Diablo, sure. Who cares? There is like a middle ground of grind. But one of my complaints about Fallout 4, because I can't let this go, is the grindiness of grinding up the follower rep, right? Where I was trying to get like Piper to like me and like Preston to like me. Those were like those were like the XCOM quote unquote grind, in the sense that each time they were saying, hey, well, it's actually not entirely true because they gave me repeat missions all the time because their procedural, their algorithm probably sucks. But, hey, go free this guy from super minions or super, what are they called? Super mutants, right? It was a different location every time, right? But because it was a location that I had already cleared, because my tactics in the game really had not changed all that much, even though sometimes I was doing it in the northeast section of the map, sometimes I was doing it in the southwest section of the map, that to me felt grindy. What I'm doing in XCOM doesn't feel grindy. And it's a gray area. It's hairs to split, but, There are hairs in there. And like I said before, XCOM is starting to feel grindy because I'm not really in the I've kind of surpassed the point. I've seen all of the enemy units, right? I'm not discovering new content at the same rate that I was when I was first starting the game. And even though the mechanics of doing these missions have stayed basically the same for the entirety of my playthrough or whatever, it has transitioned from not grind to grind because of that decrease in new content.
But that doesn't change like the gameplay. Like, essentially, what you're saying is that I would kind of approach it that like if the gameplay is grindy now, it was always grindy. You just this is probably just another definition disagreement, but like,
well, that's what I mean, right? When the gameplay
was always grindy.
I don't think that's true because the rate at which the gameplay was giving me new content, which I think is a lot of what grinding comes down to, like goes up and down to, right? As it was giving me new content, it wasn't grindy. As it was giving me, content that I had already seen, I had already played through, I had already dealt with, it became grinding, right? Because there was nothing. Because do you see like the?
I think I see your point. I don't know if I agree with you, but that's kind of the nature of.
Well, because I don't think it's grinding when I enter into a mission and it's a bunch of guys. It's the first time I ever see a Viper, right? That really changes the dynamics of how I'm playing the mission, right? It really and that experience of here's a new problem, tackle it, is antithetical to grinding, I think. XCOM gets there by introducing lots of new enemies, but once I've exhausted the supply of new enemies to fight, well, then the grinding sort of sets in, because at that point there's not a lot new that I'm being.
The changes you get by leveling up, that doesn't count as grinding, or that
sure.
Counts
well,
as
so
grinding,
that doesn't count as. So yeah, the first time I get a ranger to level 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And I'm playing with these new abilities. Honestly, the first time that I get one ranger up one side of the tree, another ranger up another side of the tree, you know what I mean? Like, those kinds of pieces aren't all that grindy specifically. Just because, like, yeah, my Phantom plays a lot different than my Blade Master, right? Blade Master being all on the right side of the tree where your guy isn't all that worried about stealth, but he's really good at just like slicing people with his, laser katana. Phantom being, all about stealth and making sure that you use concealment and stealth bonuses in the right possible way. That's new content, right? But at the point, this happened in my most recent Iron Man game, at the point where both of my specialists died. My high level, one was a colonel, one was a major. They both died because RNG sucks, right? When I was leveling up that third specialist, and I knew that I needed to just throw him up the left side of the tree because I needed a healer, right? My tactics were defined by the fact that I needed a healer who could do long-range aid protocols and long-range heals on my rangers who were going nuts. That was grinding. It was grinding to get that guy to that level, I think. Because I'd already been there before. I'd already tread that ground.
But but doesn't this directly contradict your point about with JRPGs in general, right? Like, in general, most JRPG, or at least most very typical JRPGs, have like one person from each class, and they're their own kind of like silo of advancement.
Yeah, but I also feel like JRPGs are, generally speaking, pretty slow. The rate at level up is
the rate you get interesting things is
yeah,
slow.
because a lot of this also comes down to rates, kind of like we established before, right? Where when my chance to get a legendary item is increased by 100%, or is increased 100 times over, right? That is, on the scale, much more grindy than it is with the decreased drop chance, or increased drop chance. Wow, well, anyway, so the JRPGs where level ups are few and far between, even though I'm getting new abilities, I'm not getting them with the regularity that I'm getting them in XCOM. I'm not presented with new maps. I'm not presented with new mission types. I'm not presented with new enemies as often as I am in XCOM, because in a lot of JRPGs, the expectation is I'm going to go back and grind, lower level. If there's a JRPG out there, Pokemon is a lot like this. If there's a JRPG out there that paces this stuff appropriately, that's fine. We're good. We're totally in the right spot. But it's the kind of stuff where, like, oh, I have to go back and I have to grind out this Pokemon, this party member, this guy in Fire Emblem or whatever, in order to get him to the part. That's the part that grindiness bothers me in JRPGs.
No, I think that's fair. I think also that barrier is going to be different for different people, obviously.
Yeah,
But,
definitely.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, a pretty fair opinion, or at least a fair kind of like framework to evaluate on.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit idiosyncratic. That's not necessarily the definition of grinding that other people have, but it's,
Yeah, I mean, so, you have described something that you do not like, and things that are otherwise are things that are okay, and I think that kind of gets us where we want to be with this conversation, right? Like, maybe you wouldn't call it good grinding, but it's a good thing, and whether or not somebody calls it grinding or not is ultimately irrelevant. But enough with aphorisms. I think that's about it, right?
Yeah, that definitely sounds like we've covered it pretty extensively. I guess tune in for more Hell's Rebels and Rune Lords Monday and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. ish Eastern.
And
no, Pacific. I'm lying. 6 p.m. Pacific.
Yes, and soonish we will get we will have we will have the other game, the Shadowruns.
Yeah, we've been teasing Shadowrun for a long time. I'm excited.
I am too.
I like Shadowrun.
I like different systems.
Based on what I've read. I like different systems too. Some of them are more robust and some of them are less. I think Pathfinder is a very robust system, but I think certain systems kind of don't lend themselves to like fully campaign length campaigns, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, like Paranoia is definitely that way. Yeah. I read another Paranoia game this weekend. It did not. I did not go as, or I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the first game. I think the players enjoyed it enough, so ultimately that's what's important. But I think maybe a topic for another episode is sometimes like, when the PF hammer is hitting problems that aren't nails. I think that's a thing, at least for our group, even to explore a little bit more depth is different systems for different times.
I am interested by that topic because I'm not really quite sure what I understand the principle. I don't necessarily see examples, but that's a teaser. That's the after credits.
Oof,
you know,
that's where you. That's where
Nick Fury is asking us to join the Avengers.
We find out about Cable in a recreation of what movie was that from?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Yes, spoilers for Deadpool.
I thought that was clever. I wanted more of that from Deadpool. Anyway,
but yeah, until
Deadpool was fun. Go see it.
Until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, farewell.